My question is about the dark night of the soul. Mm, have you had personal experiences with it?
Most definitely.
And was it only once? Did it come back? And if you want to, could you share, please, maybe in depth and without any positivity or painting it nicely or beautifully so that people won't get scared? I really appreciate honesty and
Uh,
on that level as well.
are you going through such a thing yourself?
I'm in the midst of sometimes utmost horror. But it goes in waves, luckily. But it sometimes is unbearable.
Yeah.
Hell. I don't know any other word.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm sorry.
And even traumatizing. So it has effects on my whole life.
Yeah.
And it's down spiraling me. So when people talk about the beneficial aspects of the dark night of the soul, or also of Kundalini rising, it happened to me, but in a disfortunate way. It nearly destroyed my body. Okay, people say in the spiritual scene, that's the undoing, that's the unraveling. And all the advice I got was pretty much, to say the least, unhelpful in the beginning. Talking about surrender and stuff where really action was needed. So a confusion of what you were talking about, the levels of absolute.
Yeah, it's a confusion of levels, really. It's really true.
Absolutely. And I really would have needed physical health. Physical help to maintain my health, and my health was spiraling down. Then some complex PTSD developed, and I do not feel any sort of mercy. That is now the state where I'm really struggling. Like, I would love to go back to this very beautiful fairy tale esoteric thinking of God loves you and everything is benevolent and beneficial in the end. But you know what? You die in the process of it, nobody cares. That is my experience. I've been several times really close to death, and the trauma stays in the body, and the trauma and the body does no past. And fucking hell, I'm having a body and I'm living in this body. So I'm being pulled back and forth. The darkness is pulling me in a positive sense, and kind of I'm dissolving in it. But my nervous system can't deal with it. It's like sometimes I'm like lost in it for 5 hours, and I'm getting in a mess for the rest of the day. And so things do not cooperate anymore because my nervous system is really wrecked. And so maybe you can correspond from your own experience or from other people, or say anything helpful or soothing or something like that.
Yeah. The first thing is thank you for sharing this. Thank you for speaking what is spiritually incorrect.
For speaking?
Thank you for speaking what is so spiritually incorrect.
Yes.
It's like politically incorrect, except in spiritual circles. This is the least thing people want to. And this is life. Look, I just say yes. That's the first thing I want to say to you. Yes. Life is incredibly difficult. And when there's an opening of the energetic centers or the energetic dimensions, often there can be this kind of flood of overwhelm. Geez, where to start? Just there. Life is hard. So the first thing, just to kind of directly address some of what you said, and then we can go further because there's a whole piece of this. This is huge. I feel the existential angst in the center of existence is something that real deep embodiment of spiritual embodiment needs. It's not possible to be really fully embodied and fully compassionate unless we are willing to begin to allow ourselves to be honest about how difficult things really are underneath everything. There's, you know, the way I talk about things is that that identity. There's lots of ways to talk about identity. There's so many different spiritual, I mean, if you talk from a Buddhist or a Kashmir Shaivite or an Advaitin perspective or anything like this, there's a lot of different ways of cutting up the pie of existence, of describing what we are and who we are. But to talk it in big chunks, just like basic, almost a generic form of spirituality. Our identity is at 3 levels. At one level, transcendental divine identity, there are no problems because there's no self. There's just pure awareness. We are pure awareness. We are simply the awareness of all that's happening. We are a mirror in which the reflections include every single thing that's happening emotionally, physically, every way. It's just happening in us. And it isn't a matter of us being unperturbed as some kind of attainment. Our nature is unperturbable. It is simply like a mirror. You can have horrible reflections in a mirror. A mirror is simply reflecting horrible reflections without any reaction whatsoever. Every reaction that happens is happening in the mirror. It's part of the reflections. And it's not as though a mirror is like, you could say in a sense, a mirror is absolutely indifferent to what happens within it. But it's not as though a mirror is removed, like standing back. You can't get more intimate than between a mirror and her reflections. They're in her. But she is frictionless. They're just, right? So this is the emptiness, the spaciousness that we are, the space that we always are. Not an experience of being spacious and then not spacious and not spacious. That's something a little different. That's actually a reflection in the mirror. So that's, I call that transcendental divine identity. That's our transcendent divine identity. That's transcendent, it's beyond everything. And, you know, many of us have been pointed in that direction and seen that and glimpsed that and know it even. Doesn't mean it's the only thing we know. Doesn't, you know, but it's an intuition, a knowing, a background knowing sometimes, but it's there. Then there's also, you could say, the embodied human identity of being simply a person in a body. It's an experience of being a person in a body, of having a past and a future, of having family, of having jobs, of being a person, period. Very subject to all kinds of, there's others. See, now, it's not just that our identity is different in these realms, but the whole truth is different in this realm. Now there's others, okay? So in the transcendental divine identity, there is no others. It's just identity, right? All others are simply reflections. The body, the individual you, everything are simply reflections in you as identity. You're just aware of all of this, not including yourself. It's just whatever. Whatever happens here is not really relevant. Like Nisargadatta said, can live or die. Like Ramana Maharshi, when he's in the cave, as a yogi, little things are eating his legs and he's not even aware of it. You know, it's just, if he should die, he dies. He gets dysentery, he dies. Whatever. It's all just happening. And for him, outside, inside, no difference. Others, self, no difference. If they should die, same thing. Simply just happening. But as an embodied human identity, things matter. There's other people, there's us, there's a nervous system responding, reacting to others. We can get our stuff and get, you know, be very meditative and feel good and remember the self and all of that. And then somebody comes in and gives us the finger and tells us they hate our guts and this and that, takes everything we have, throws it to the ground. What? There's no reaction. There's no fear? Of course there is. As an embodied human identity, there is. And that is also who we are. This is why I call practical mysticism. We are also that, this, also. Something called transcendence through inclusion, rather than transcendence by exclusion. Transcendence by exclusion is, oh, that I that feels all that, that's not really you, it's just reflections. I am going to exclude the experience of being an I from my experience. I will continuously only be that which is aware of everything. What I find is that if it's absolutely karmically determined and natural for a person, there's no problem. But 99.9% of us, it's bullshit. It's called spiritual bypassing. What we're doing is we're wishing that was true of us. We're wishing we were in the position of Ramana Maharshi. If you really feel like you're in the position of Ramana Maharshi, really, then think about doing what he did. Go live homeless and put a bowl out and see how you'd feel. Would you be cool about it? Okay, then you're in. Then that's it. You're fine. Most of us, no, let's be honest. It doesn't mean we're not awake in some way. Maybe we're not Ramana Maharshi, but we're awake in some way. We're awake to the transcendent. But we also have an experience of being an I with a body, with others, trauma, a past, look forward to a future. All of that is also real. And the transcendence that I found happens through inclusion is also very real. There's a transcendence, but it's not the same as simply cutting it off and deciding, I'm not that. You are that. You are the person you also are the person who has gone through all your past. Now you could say, in a sense, it's delusion. Yes, in a sense, it's delusion. No doubt about that. But the depth of your understanding, the evidence of it, is the degree to which you actually have let it go all together without any trace. And 99% of us, we're just constantly struggling with this. I remember when I first got involved with Advaita Vedanta in 1992, the community that I was with, everybody would go around saying, oh, this body feels hungry. And this body just feels a little hurt. And this body, it's as if they're not the body, but you knew, just people would have an argument. And then suddenly it's like, oh, there's a lot of identification with this body. Well, yes, there's still identification with this body. And it was like this constant splitting of the I who wants to be not there with the body and the mind. So it's like, still, it's a split among the reflections. See, there's no split when you're simply being the mirror. The mirror is not turning away from its reflections, not having an opinion with the reflections, not disassociating from the reflections. Put it this way, the embodied human identity, our identity as embodied humans, as an I that's in the body, is a result of the conditioning of our families, of our situation, right? And that situation, I can tell you, the whole world is conspired for there to be a kind of, unconsciously, for there to be a kind of split between an I and this body. Because it's so difficult to be here as a body, because the body is going to die, and because the body is out of control, and the body is not in our hands, and the situation in life is not in our hands. When we start to realize that, very, very young, at some level, even pre-thinking really, that this is overwhelming, that this is kind of unsafe as a body. Now, it's overwhelmingly frightening to be a body. It's too much. So what happens for the human species to survive, to not just freak out and being always like in absolute sheer terror, horror of its situation as a body, is a kind of, there's strategies that are taught having to do with having a sensation that you're not this body, but rather that you're an I somewhere in the body, having a body. Like pull back. So you're way in the back of the room and your body is over there and you can control it. And when emotions arise, they're not exactly mine. So this is like a person who's like well adjusted and very rational. Often they are at a good level from everything so that it doesn't affect them. But who's them? Them is someone who owns a body, not who is a body. Okay, so this is what we're trained to do. We're trained to be an I that has a body. If you become exposed to the third dimension that's between the two, which I call energetic presence dimension, energetic presence identity. That can be Kundalini, that can be any kind of opening through psychedelics, through different kinds of drugs, through being with a teacher as a very strong Shakti, very strong energy. What ends up happening is you open up in your energetic presence identity, your energetic feeling presence. But what that does is opens you also to the feeling dimension in the embodied human dimension. Ah, you weren't ready to actually, we didn't actually realize, many of us, even come across awakening where there's transmission, where there's energy. Kundalini in particular, but any kind of energetic field where your energetic field gets awakened. There can be a feeling of bliss and openness and oneness that's ecstatic, but then you start to feel all the pain that's actually out there and in here. Because what it is, all the pain of existence, is ultimately, it's the knowing of our vulnerability. Just how vulnerable we are. This is the stuff of nightmares. It's letting in the information, not because you want to think about it, but because you're starting to feel it in your being, because you're one with everything. You feel everything. Now, if you go, well, I'm not going to think about that, and you start to open up to the feeling dimension, and you're feeling the whole, you're feeling everybody else who has to think about that. Their problems are your problems now. Why? Because they are. You're not separate from them. And this is the starving, the brokenhearted, everybody. It's overwhelming. So this is the thing, I say for somebody who starts to drop into and fall into the existential angst of life when their energetic presence identity bodies are opening up, which is what really the dark night of the soul is when we're feeling all of this, that you have to bring the anchors in both directions without denying the middle, without denying this core woundedness. You can't deny it. It is actually, I think, I never use this word. It's a great sin to deny the existential pain in the center of existence, because it cuts you off from real compassion. And it actually is a great center of spiritual depth, because the more we are willing to feel this, or the more we know we have to unwillingly feel this, that we will have to unwillingly feel this, the more compassion we have,